The train lurched to a halt in Tulsa, Oklahoma territory, and Wilhelmina Lambert pressed her gloved hand against the cool glass window, watching dust devils dance across the unpaved street beyond the platform. Knowing that somewhere in this crowd of strangers waited a man who had paid for a bride he believed to be virtuous and untainted. She was neither. The year was 1891, and the shame that clung to her like a second skin had followed her all the way from Philadelphia, where whispers had destroyed her reputation faster than any fire could have consumed the boarding house where she had worked. The accusations had been false, the insinuations cruel, but truth mattered little when society had already decided your fate. A wealthy patron's son had forced himself upon her in the darkness of the third-floor hallway, and when she fought back hard enough to leave scratches across his face, he had spun a tale of seduction that his mother believed without question. Within 3 days, Wilhelmina had lost her position, her references, and any hope of respectable employment in a city that suddenly viewed her as a fallen woman. The mail-order bride advertisement had seemed like salvation wrapped in desperation. A rancher in Oklahoma territory seeking a wife, willing to pay travel expenses, asking only for someone honest and hardworking. She had answered with a letter that told truths about her ability to cook and sew and manage a household, while omitting the circumstances that had driven her to seek a husband among strangers. The exchange of correspondence had been brief, practical, and now she sat on this train, about to meet Theodore Walsh, a man who expected something she could never be again in the eyes of society, even if her conscience remained clear. The conductor called out the final stop, and Wilhelmina gathered her single carpetbag, the sum total of her earthly possessions. She had sold everything else to purchase the dress she wore, a modest gray traveling suit that she hoped conveyed respectability. Her dark blonde hair was pinned severely beneath a plain hat, and she had practiced her smile in the train window for 3 days, trying to achieve something that looked like hope rather than terror. Stepping onto the platform felt like walking to her own execution. The Oklahoma sun beat down with an intensity that Philadelphia had never prepared her for, and she raised one hand to shield her eyes as she scanned the crowd for a man matching the description Theodore Walsh had provided in his letters. Tall, dark-haired, 32 years old, likely wearing a tan hat and carrying a rope. She spotted him standing apart from the others, his height making him easy to identify even in the crush of people. He held his hat in his hands, turning it slowly as his eyes moved across each woman who descended from the train. When his gaze landed on her, something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes that made her breath catch. Theodore Walsh was handsome in a weathered, sun-bronzed way that spoke of years working outdoors. His dark hair curled slightly at the collar, and his face bore the marks of someone who smiled often, though at this moment he looked as nervous as she felt. He approached slowly as if afraid she might bolt like a startled horse. "Miss Lambert." His voice was deep, gentle, nothing like the harsh tones she had braced herself to hear. Yes, her own voice came out barely above a whisper. "Mr. Walsh, Theodore, please." He offered a small smile that did reach his eyes this time. "I hope the journey was not too difficult." It was long but manageable. The practiced words felt wooden on her tongue. An awkward silence stretched between them as other reunions and greetings swirled around them on the platform. Theodore cleared his throat and gestured toward a wagon waiting at the edge of the street. "I thought we could head to my ranch, get you settled. There's a spare room you can use until we get properly acquainted. I know this must all be very strange for you." The kindness in his words nearly undid her composure. She had expected demands, perhaps even immediate insistence on marriage, but this careful consideration was something she had not anticipated. "Thank you. That would be most appreciated." He took her carpetbag without asking and led the way to the wagon, a sturdy vehicle pulled by two well-groomed horses. Theodore helped her up onto the bench seat with a steadying hand on her elbow, then climbed up beside her. The leather creaked as he settled his weight, and then they were moving through the dusty streets of Tulsa. The town was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of wooden buildings and wide streets that seemed designed for the massive cattle drives she had read about in newspapers. People moved with purpose here, none of the aimless strolling she was accustomed to in Philadelphia. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to be, something to accomplish. "Tulsa's growing fast," Theodore said, clearly trying to fill the silence. "When I first came here 8 years ago, there were maybe a dozen buildings. Now we have got proper stores, a church, even a schoolhouse. Not as grand as what you are used to, I imagine, coming from Philadelphia." "I lived in a boarding house and worked in service," Wilhelmina said quietly. "I am not accustomed to anything grand." Theodore glanced at her, something curious in his expression. "Your letters said you were a housekeeper. That's honest work." It was. She kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead, until it was not possible anymore. She could feel his attention on her, the unasked questions hovering in the air between them. But to his credit, Theodore did not press. Instead, he pointed out landmarks as they left the town behind and entered open country. The ranch land stretched endlessly in all directions, grass rippling like water under the persistent wind. "My spread is about 5 miles from town," Theodore explained. 300 acres. I run cattle mostly, some horses. It is not the biggest ranch in the territory, but it is mine, paid for fair and square. The house is simple but solid. I built it myself 4 years back when I finally had enough saved." "You built it yourself?" Wilhelmina could not keep the surprise from her voice. "With some help from neighbors," Theodore acknowledged. "But yes, every board and nail. It is not fancy, but it keeps out the rain and the wind, and it has got a good stone fireplace that heats the whole place in winter." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon wheels crunching over the dirt road. Wilhelmina tried to imagine what her life would be like here, so far from everything she had ever known. The landscape was beautiful in its vastness, but also terrifying in its emptiness. In Philadelphia, she had never been more than shouting distance from another person. Here the isolation felt absolute. "Miss Lambert," Theodore said finally, his voice careful, "I want you to know that I do not expect anything from you right away. My letters were honest about what I am looking for, a partner, a companion, someone to build a life with. But I understand this is all new and probably frightening. We can take whatever time you need to feel comfortable." The unexpected gentleness in his words made her throat tighten. "You do not know anything about me. What if I am not what you hoped for? Are you unkind?" The question surprised her. "No. Are you lazy? Certainly not. Do you have a violent temper or cruel disposition? No." Theodore smiled, the expression transforming his serious face into something genuinely warm. "Then I suspect you are exactly what I hoped for. The rest we will figure out together." Wilhelmina wanted to tell him the truth, to explain why she had fled Philadelphia, but fear closed her throat. What if he sent her back? What if the kindness in his eyes turned to disgust? She had nowhere else to go, no money for train fare, no other prospects. So she stayed silent and watched the prairie roll by. The ranch house appeared on the horizon after another mile, a sturdy structure of wood and stone that looked like it had grown naturally from the landscape. It was larger than she had expected, with a wide front porch and glass windows that caught the afternoon sun. Several outbuildings dotted the property, including a substantial barn and what looked like a bunkhouse. "I've got 2 hands who help with the cattle," Theodore explained as they approached. "Jake and Samuel. They are good men, respectful. Jake is married and lives in town with his wife. Samuel stays in the bunkhouse. You would not have to worry about their presence." "I am not worried." The words came out more sharply than she intended, a defensive reflex from months of being treated like she might contaminate any man who came near her. Theodore did not seem offended. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and set the brake before jumping down and coming around to help her descend. His hands on her waist were brief and respectful, releasing her the moment her feet touched the ground. The inside of the house was dim after the brilliant sunlight, and Wilhelmina blinked as her eyes adjusted. The main room was open and airy, with the promised stone fireplace dominating one wall. The furniture was simple but well made, clearly crafted by someone who knew their way around woodworking. Everything was clean, almost aggressively so, and she realized Theodore must have spent considerable time preparing for her arrival. "The kitchen is through there," Theodore said, pointing to a doorway. "I am afraid my cooking skills are limited to what keeps a man alive rather than what tastes good. I am hoping you might be better at it than me. I can cook." It was one of the few skills she felt confident claiming. "Your room is upstairs." Theodore picked up her carpetbag again and led the way up a narrow staircase. The second floor held 3 rooms, all with doors standing open. He showed her to the largest, a space with a real bed covered in a quilt that looked handmade, a dresser, a washstand, and even a small mirror on the wall. "I will be in the room at the end of the hall," Theodore said, setting her bag on the bed. "The middle room is just storage right now. I will leave you to get settled. Take whatever time you need. There is water in the kitchen if you want to wash up, and I will start thinking about supper." He left before she could respond, his boots heavy on the stairs. Wilhelmina stood in the center of the room, surrounded by more space and privacy than she had known in years, and felt tears burning behind her eyes. This man, this stranger, was offering her a chance at a new life, and she was deceiving him with every breath she did not use to confess her shame. She unpacked her meager belongings, hanging her 2 extra dresses in the small wardrobe and arranging her brush and pins on the dresser. The face that looked back at her from the mirror seemed older than her 23 years, marked by exhaustion and worry. She splashed water from the basin over her cheeks and took several deep breaths, trying to gather the courage to go back downstairs. When she finally descended, she found Theodore in the kitchen, staring at a collection of ingredients spread across the table as if they might spontaneously arrange themselves into a meal. He looked up when she entered, relief clear on his face. "I was contemplating beans again," he admitted. "I eat a lot of beans." Despite everything, Wilhelmina felt a smile tug at her lips. "I can do better than beans. Do you have any meat?" "There is salt pork in the larder and some beef that needs using soon." She moved into the kitchen space, assessing what was available. The larder was well stocked with basics: flour, cornmeal, lard, dried beans, rice. She found potatoes in a bin and onions hanging in a basket. Not the abundance of a Philadelphia market, but more than enough to work with. "I can make a stew," she said, "if you do not mind waiting while it cooks." "I do not mind at all." Theodore leaned against the doorframe, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "It is strange having someone else in the house. Good strange, I mean. It has been quiet here for a long time. You have lived alone all these years." Wilhelmina began cutting the beef into chunks, grateful for something to do with her hands. "Mostly. When I first came to Oklahoma, I worked for other ranchers, lived in bunkhouses. Once I got my own land, I built the house, and it has just been me except for when the hands are around." He paused. "My parents died when I was young. Fever took them both within a week of each other. I was raised by my uncle in Kansas, but we did not see eye to eye on much. I left when I was 18 and have been on my own since." "I am sorry about your parents." She meant it. Despite her own troubles, she still had her mother and sisters back in Philadelphia, even if they had believed the lies told about her. It was a long time ago. Theodore straightened. "I should let you work. I will be in the barn if you need anything. Just ring the bell on the porch when supper is ready." After he left, Wilhelmina worked in the quiet kitchen, falling into the familiar rhythms of preparing a meal. She browned the meat, added the vegetables and water, seasoned it with salt and herbs she found in jars on a shelf. As the stew began to simmer, filling the house with savory smells, she found herself relaxing slightly. This, at least, she knew how to do. This was honest work that no one could twist into something shameful. She made biscuits to go with the stew, using Theodore's surprisingly well-equipped kitchen. By the time the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber, she had a meal ready that would have satisfied the most demanding employer in Philadelphia. She rang the bell, and Theodore appeared from the barn within minutes, followed by a younger man she assumed was Samuel. They both removed their hats before entering the house, and Theodore made quick introductions. "Samuel Potter, this is Miss Wilhelmina Lambert. She will be staying here as my intended." Samuel was perhaps 20, with sandy hair and an earnest face that flushed red when he nodded to her. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Lambert. I will just wash up outside." Theodore showed her where he kept the dishes, and they set the table together in surprisingly comfortable silence. When Samuel returned, they all sat down to eat, and Wilhelmina watched anxiously as both men took their first bites. Theodore's eyes closed briefly, and he made a sound of pure satisfaction. "Miss Lambert, this is the best thing I have eaten in longer than I can remember. It is just stew." But she felt a warm flush of pride at the genuine appreciation in his voice. It is not just stew to a man who has been eating his own cooking for 4 years. Theodore reached for a biscuit, broke it open, and steam rose from the fluffy interior. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother taught me the basics, and then I learned more in service. The family I worked for entertained frequently." She did not add that she had been dismissed from that position before the accusations in the boarding house, let go when the lady of the house noticed her husband's eyes following the help a bit too intently. They ate in companionable quiet, with Samuel offering shy compliments and Theodore going back for seconds, and then thirds. After the meal, Samuel excused himself back to the bunkhouse, and Wilhelmina began clearing the dishes. "You cooked, I will clean," Theodore said, gently taking a plate from her hands. "That is not necessary." "Maybe not, but it is fair." He smiled at her. "My mother always said a partnership means sharing the work. You can cook again tomorrow if you are willing, and I will keep doing the dishes." "That seems like a good trade to me." Wilhelmina felt something unknot slightly in her chest. She retreated to the main room and sat in one of the chairs near the fireplace, watching through the kitchen doorway, as Theodore washed dishes with the same careful attention he seemed to bring to everything. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms tanned dark and marked with old scars, the evidence of years of hard work. When he finished, he came and sat in the chair opposite hers, the fire crackling between them even though the evening was still warm. For a long moment, neither spoke, and Wilhelmina felt the weight of all her secrets pressing against her ribs. "Theodore," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "there are things you should know about me, Things that might change your mind about this arrangement." His expression remained calm, open. "All right. I am listening." The words caught in her throat. She had rehearsed this confession 100 times on the train, but now, faced with his kindness and the possibility of losing this fragile new beginning, she could not force them out. "I am not what you think I am," she managed finally. "In Philadelphia, there were accusations. People believed I had acted in a way that was improper. I lost my position, my reputation. I came here because I had nowhere else to go." Theodore leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "What kind of accusations?" A man, the son of a wealthy family at the boarding house, he forced his attentions on me. When I fought him off, he told his mother that I had tried to seduce him. Everyone believed him. Why would they not? He was rich and respected, and I was just hired help. The silence that followed felt eternal. Wilhelmina kept her eyes fixed on her hands, twisted together in her lap, unable to bear seeing disgust replace the warmth in Theodore's face. "Look at me." His voice was gentle but firm. She forced herself to meet his gaze, bracing for condemnation. "Did you do what he accused you of?" Theodore asked. "No, never. I tried to fight him off, and when I scratched his face, he invented the story to protect himself." Theodore nodded slowly. "Then you have nothing to be ashamed of." "The shame belongs to him, to the people who believed lies over truth." "But my reputation," she started. "Your reputation in Philadelphia does not matter here." Theodore's voice was steady, certain. "Whatever happened there, whatever people said, it has got no bearing on who you are or what kind of life we can build. If you are telling me the truth, and I believe you are, then you are the victim of injustice, not the perpetrator of some moral failing." Wilhelmina felt tears spill down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I was so afraid to tell you. I thought you would send me back." "Send you back to what? More accusations and shame you do not deserve." Theodore shook his head firmly. "There is no shame in my home, Wilhelmina. Not for defending yourself, not for surviving injustice, not for anything you have done to stay alive and keep your honor intact. Do you understand me?" She nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Theodore rose and crossed to her chair, kneeling beside it so they were at eye level. "I wrote those advertisements because I wanted a partner, someone honest and strong. What you just told me proves you are both. It takes courage to survive what you survived, and even more courage to tell me about it when you had every reason to keep it hidden. I could not start this with lies between us." Wilhelmina wiped at her tears with shaking hands. "Then we are starting with honesty, which is more than most marriages can claim." Theodore reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took one of her hands in his. His palm was calloused and warm. "I know we barely know each other, but I want you to feel safe here. Whatever time you need before we marry, however long it takes for you to trust me, I will wait. And if you decide this is not what you want, I will help you find another situation, somewhere you can start fresh without judgment." The generosity of his offer, the sheer decency of this man, overwhelmed her. "I want to stay. If you will still have me, knowing what you know now, knowing what I know now, I am more certain than ever." Theodore squeezed her hand gently before releasing it and standing. "It has been a long day for both of us. You should get some rest. Tomorrow, I will show you around the ranch properly, introduce you to the horses. Do you ride?" "I never learned." It was another source of shame in Philadelphia, where many young ladies of better station rode regularly. "Then I will teach you if you would like. It is useful out here, and the horses are good company." Theodore moved toward the stairs, then paused. "Thank you for telling me the truth, Wilhelmina. It means more than you probably realize." She watched him climb the stairs, his boots heavy on the wood, and sat for a long time staring into the fire. The weight she had carried for months felt lighter somehow, not gone entirely but no longer crushing. She had told the truth and been believed. It was more than she had dared to hope for. That night, she slept better than she had in months, lulled by the unfamiliar sounds of the prairie and the knowledge that tomorrow would not bring whispers and pointing fingers. The next morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. She dressed quickly in her oldest dress, knowing that ranch work would require practicality over appearance, and made her way to the kitchen. Theodore was attempting to scramble eggs with limited success. He looked up when she entered and gave her a rueful smile. "I am hoping you can rescue these before they turn into leather." She took over the pan, salvaging the eggs and adding some precious butter and herbs to improve them. Theodore watched her work with open admiration, and they ate together as the sun climbed higher in the sky. After breakfast, true to his word, Theodore took her on a tour of the ranch. He showed her the barn where the horses were kept, introducing her to each one by name and personality. There was Thunder, his own mount, a massive black gelding with a white star on his forehead. There was Daisy, a gentle mare he said would be perfect for teaching her to ride. And there were several others, each with their own quirks and temperaments. "I breed horses on the side," Theodore explained, running his hand down Daisy's neck with obvious affection. "Cattle pay the bills, but horses are my passion. There is something about working with them, earning their trust, that I find satisfying." Wilhelmina understood that instinct completely. She reached out tentatively to stroke Daisy's soft nose, and the mare waffled into her palm, making her laugh with delight. "She likes you," Theodore observed. "That is a good sign. Horses are excellent judges of character." Over the following days, a routine developed. Wilhelmina would wake early and prepare breakfast for Theodore, Samuel, and Jake when he rode out from town. The men would head out to work with the cattle or mend fences or any of the 100 other tasks that kept a ranch running. Wilhelmina would clean the house, prepare meals, and in the afternoons, Theodore would give her riding lessons. Learning to ride was both terrifying and exhilarating. Theodore was an excellent teacher, patient and encouraging, never making her feel foolish when she lost her balance or became nervous. Daisy seemed to understand her inexperience and moved carefully, as if aware she carried precious cargo. "You are a natural," Theodore said after her 5th lesson, watching as she successfully guided Daisy around the corral at a trot. "Another week and you will be ready to ride out on the range. I would like that." And she meant it. The brief glimpses she had gotten of the wider ranch had shown her a landscape of stunning beauty, all rolling grassland and endless sky. She wanted to see more of it, to understand this place that was becoming home. In the evenings, they would sit together in the main room, sometimes talking, sometimes reading in comfortable silence. Theodore had a small collection of books, well-worn volumes of poetry and adventure stories that he clearly treasured. He lent them to her freely, and they would discuss what they read, their conversations ranging from light-hearted to surprisingly deep. "My uncle thought reading was a waste of time," Theodore told her one evening. "He believed working from sunup to sundown was the only worthwhile pursuit. But I always felt like books opened up the world. They taught me about places I will never see, people I will never meet." "I feel the same way," Wilhelmina said. "When I was young, books were my escape from the crowded boarding house, from the noise and the dirt. I could be anyone, go anywhere." "And now, what do you dream of now?" She considered the question seriously. "Now I dream of peace, of a place where my past does not define me, where I can build something lasting." Theodore's eyes held hers across the firelight. "You can have that here if you want it." The attraction between them had been growing steadily, undeniable but unspoken. Wilhelmina found herself watching him when he did not notice, admiring the strength in his shoulders, the gentleness in his hands when he worked with the horses. She caught him looking at her too, his gaze lingering on her face with an expression that made her heart race. 3 weeks after her arrival, Theodore asked if she would like to ride into Tulsa with him to pick up supplies. She agreed eagerly, excited to see the town properly and to be seen publicly as Theodore's intended. They took the wagon, the same one that had brought her from the train station, and the familiarity of the route struck her. So much had changed in such a short time. Tulsa was busier than she remembered, filled with people going about their Saturday business. Theodore helped her down from the wagon and offered his arm, which she took, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her. They made their way to the general store, where Theodore introduced her to the proprietor, a cheerful man named Henry who pumped her hand enthusiastically. "So you are the mail-order bride we have all been hearing about," Henry said with a broad smile. "Theodore has not stopped talking about you since you arrived, says you cook like an angel." Wilhelmina felt herself blushing. "He exaggerates." "He does not," Theodore said firmly. "Every word is true." As they shopped, selecting flour and sugar and other staples, several people approached to introduce themselves and welcome Wilhelmina to town. The warmth of their reception surprised her. No one looked at her with suspicion or judgment. They seemed genuinely pleased that Theodore had found someone. A woman about her own age approached while Theodore was discussing feed prices with Henry. She had kind eyes and a direct manner that Wilhelmina immediately appreciated. "I am Clara Morrison," she said. "My husband owns the feed store down the street. I wanted to welcome you properly and invite you to our quilting circle. We meet every Wednesday afternoon at the church." "I would like that very much," Wilhelmina said, meaning it. The prospect of female friendship, of community, was more appealing than she had expected. "Wonderful. And if you need anything at all, our house is the blue one on 3rd Street. Do not hesitate to call." After Clara left, Theodore appeared at Wilhelmina's elbow with a length of fabric draped over his arm. "I saw you looking at this earlier. I thought it might make a nice dress." The fabric was beautiful, a deep blue cotton printed with small white flowers. It was finer than anything she had owned in years. "Theodore, I cannot accept this. It is too much." "It is not too much. You need dresses for ranch work and you deserve something pretty." His voice dropped lower. "I want to give you things, Wilhelmina. I want to see you happy." Looking up into his earnest face, she saw the truth of his words. This was not about obligation or duty. He genuinely cared about her happiness, wanted to provide for her not because he had to, but because it brought him joy. "Thank you," she said softly. "It is beautiful." His answering smile made her pulse quicken. They loaded their purchases into the wagon and began the drive back to the ranch. The afternoon sun was warm, and Wilhelmina found herself leaning slightly against Theodore's shoulder, enjoying the simple pleasure of his nearness. "I have been thinking," Theodore said as they left the town behind. "If you are agreeable, I would like to set a date for the wedding. I do not want to rush you, but I also do not want you to feel like you are in limbo, unsure of where you stand." Wilhelmina's heart began to race. "What did you have in mind? A month from now?" "That would give you time to make a dress from that fabric, and we could have a proper ceremony at the church with the whole town invited." He glanced at her nervously. "Unless you would prefer something smaller or want to wait longer. A month sounds perfect." The words came out more certainly than she felt, but looking at his hopeful expression, she realized it was true. She wanted to marry this man, wanted to bind her life to his officially and permanently. Theodore's whole face lit up. "Really? You are sure? I am sure." He let out a breath she had not realized he was holding. "I will talk to the preacher tomorrow. We will do this right, Wilhelmina. I promise you that." The following weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Wilhelmina threw herself into sewing her wedding dress, working by lamplight after her other chores were done. Clara and several other women from town came to help, bringing their own skills and plenty of friendly gossip. They accepted Wilhelmina without question, treating her like she had always been one of them. Theodore's happiness was obvious to everyone. He whistled while he worked, smiled more, and found excuses to be near Wilhelmina whenever possible. The physical distance they had maintained began to close naturally. He would touch her hand while passing her something at dinner. She would brush against him while working in the kitchen. The tension between them built like a summer storm. One evening, a week before the wedding, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The air was finally cooling after another hot day, and the sounds of the prairie settling for the night surrounded them. "I want you to know," Theodore said quietly, "that I understand if you are nervous. About the wedding night, I mean. After what happened to you in Philadelphia, I know that intimacy might be difficult." Wilhelmina felt her cheeks burning but appreciated his directness. "I am nervous," she admitted. "But not because of you. I trust you, Theodore. You have shown me nothing but kindness and respect." He reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I will never hurt you. That is a promise I am making right now, before God and the prairie and anything else that might be listening. Your safety, your happiness, those are more important to me than anything else." She turned to look at him, this good man who had appeared in her life when she needed him most. On impulse, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a brief, gentle kiss that nevertheless sent electricity coursing through her. When she pulled back, Theodore's eyes were wide with surprise and something deeper. "Wilhelmina," he breathed. "I wanted to do that," she said. "I have wanted to for a while now." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Can I kiss you again? Properly this time," she nodded, and then his mouth was on hers, warm and sure and tender. The kiss deepened slowly, a gradual exploration that made her blood sing. His other hand came to rest on her waist, holding her close but not constraining, always giving her the freedom to pull away if she wanted. She did not want to pull away. She wanted to stay in this moment forever, wrapped in his warmth, tasting his lips, feeling truly safe for the first time in longer than she could remember. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Theodore rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I know it is fast and maybe I should not say it yet, but it is true. I love you, Wilhelmina." Joy bubbled up in her chest, bright and effervescent. "I love you too. I think I have for a while now." They sat together on the porch until full dark, wrapped in each other's arms, talking about their future. Theodore shared his dreams of expanding the horse breeding operation, of building a legacy they could pass on to children. Wilhelmina talked about creating a real home, filled with warmth and laughter, so different from the cold boarding houses of her past. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the Oklahoma sky a brilliant blue unmarred by clouds. Wilhelmina woke early in Clara's guest room, where she had spent the night according to tradition. The women of Tulsa descended en masse to help her prepare, doing her hair in an elegant style, fastening the buttons of her dress, offering advice and encouragement. The dress had turned out beautifully. The blue fabric draped perfectly, and with the women's help, she had added delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She looked at herself in Clara's mirror and barely recognized the happy, hopeful woman staring back. The church was packed when she arrived. It seemed like every person in Tulsa, and the surrounding ranches had turned out for the wedding. Theodore stood at the front, wearing his best suit, looking impossibly handsome and slightly terrified. When his eyes found her walking down the aisle, his expression transformed into pure love and wonder. The ceremony itself passed in a haze. She heard herself saying the vows, felt Theodore's hands trembling slightly as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and then Theodore was kissing her in front of God and everyone, and the church erupted in applause. The reception was held in the churchyard, with tables of food donated by various families and music provided by local musicians. Wilhelmina danced with Theodore, with Jake and Samuel, with Henry from the general store and a dozen other men whose names she struggled to remember. Everyone was warm and welcoming, treating her like she had always belonged. As the sun began to set, Theodore leaned down and whispered in her ear, "What do you say we head home, Mrs. Walsh?" The name sent a thrill through her. "I would like that very much, Mr. Walsh." They said their goodbyes and climbed into the decorated wagon, tin cans rattling behind them as they drove away to the cheers of their friends. The ride back to the ranch felt both eternal and far too short. Wilhelmina's nervousness returned as they approached the house, but Theodore's steady presence beside her kept it from becoming overwhelming. Inside, he had clearly prepared for this night. Candles were lit throughout the main room, casting everything in warm, flickering light. He had even managed to find fresh flowers which sat in a jar on the table. "It is beautiful," Wilhelmina said softly. Theodore came up behind her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. "Are you all right? We can take this as slow as you need." She turned in his arms, looking up into his concerned face. "I am all right, better than all right. I am happy, Theodore, truly happy." He smiled and kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then finally her mouth. The kiss was slow and sweet, building gradually into something more passionate. When he swept her into his arms and carried her up the stairs, she went willingly, her heart full of love and trust. Their wedding night was everything it should be, tender and passionate, with Theodore proving true to all his promises. He was gentle and patient, making sure of her comfort at every moment, and when they finally came together completely, Wilhelmina felt the last shadows of shame and fear fall away. She was loved. She was cherished. She was home. The months that followed were the happiest of Wilhelmina's life. She thrived in her role as Theodore's wife, managing the household and helping with ranch work when needed. She became an accomplished rider, often accompanying Theodore when he checked on the cattle or visited distant parts of the property. The Wednesday quilting circle became one of her favorite parts of the week. The women welcomed her completely, and she formed genuine friendships, particularly with Clara, who became like a sister. They shared confidences and laughter, and no one ever asked about her past in Philadelphia. Here, she was simply Wilhelmina Walsh, Theodore's wife, a valued member of the community. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Theodore's horse breeding operation grew, with people coming from as far as Kansas to buy his animals. Wilhelmina proved to have a good head for business, keeping meticulous records and suggesting improvements that increased their profits. As winter approached, bringing bitter cold and occasional snow, Wilhelmina realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week to be certain before telling Theodore, choosing a quiet evening when they sat before the fire. "I think I might be with child," she said, watching his face carefully for his reaction. Theodore's expression went through several rapid changes: shock, joy, wonder. "Truly." "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor, but all the signs are there." He crossed to her chair and knelt before it, just as he had done the night she confessed her past. His hands covered her still flat stomach reverently. "A baby, our baby. Are you happy?" She needed to hear him say it. Happy does not begin to cover it. He looked up at her with tears shining in his eyes. "You have given me so much already, Wilhelmina. A home, a partnership, love, and now this. I am the most blessed man in Oklahoma Territory." They made the trip to town the following week to see the doctor, who confirmed what Wilhelmina already knew. She was indeed pregnant, due to deliver sometime in early summer. The news spread quickly through their community, bringing an outpouring of support and gifts. Clara immediately began organizing the other women to make baby clothes and blankets. Theodore started building a cradle in the barn, working on it secretly and refusing to let Wilhelmina see it until it was finished. When he finally showed her, she cried at the beautiful craftsmanship, every detail lovingly rendered. "I want our child to know they are wanted," Theodore said, running his hand along the smooth wood. "I want them to grow up surrounded by love, never doubting for a moment that they are cherished." Wilhelmina hugged him tightly, thinking about how different this child's life would be from her own difficult upbringing. This baby would know security and love from the very beginning. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through winter and into spring. Wilhelmina experienced the usual discomforts, but nothing serious. Theodore was attentive to the point of being overprotective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. She had to remind him regularly that pregnancy was not an illness, and she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities. "I am just worried about you," he said when she scolded him for trying to carry a basket of laundry that she was perfectly capable of managing. "I do not want anything to happen to you or the baby." "Nothing is going to happen. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." But she softened her words with a kiss, touched by his concern. As spring turned to summer, the baby grew larger and Wilhelmina's movements became more awkward. The heat was oppressive, made worse by her condition. Theodore rigged up a clever system of wet cloths and fans to keep their bedroom cool at night, and he would often sit with her on the porch in the evenings, reading aloud while she rested. The pain started on a June morning, early and insistent. Wilhelmina woke Theodore calmly, not wanting to panic him, but he nevertheless leapt from bed as if shot from a cannon. "I will get the doctor, and Clara, do not move, just stay right there." He was pulling on clothes haphazardly, his hands shaking. "Theodore, we have time." First babies usually take a while. But even as she spoke, another contraction gripped her, stronger than the first. He rode for town like the devil himself was chasing him, returning within an hour with both the doctor and Clara, as well as 2 other experienced women from the quilting circle. They took over the bedroom with calm efficiency, shooing Theodore out despite his protests. "This is women's work, Theodore Walsh," Clara said firmly. "You can pace downstairs or in the barn, but you cannot be in here distracting us." The labor was long and difficult. Wilhelmina had heard stories about childbirth, but nothing had quite prepared her for the reality. The pain was intense, all-consuming, and there were moments when she doubted her ability to endure. But Clara held her hand and wiped her forehead, and the doctor offered calm encouragement, and somehow she found the strength to keep going. Theodore could hear her cries from downstairs, and it was torture. He paced the main room, then the porch, then the barn, unable to settle. Samuel and Jake tried to distract him with conversation, but he was too worried to focus. Every sound from upstairs made him flinch. As evening fell and the labor continued, Theodore began to pray, something he had not done regularly since childhood. He bargained with God, promising anything if Wilhelmina and the baby would both survive. Finally, as the sun disappeared below the horizon, a new sound joined the symphony of labor. the thin, angry wail of a newborn. Theodore froze, his heart in his throat, waiting for someone to tell him what was happening. Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, her face tired but wreathed in smiles. "You have a son, Theodore, a big, healthy boy, and Wilhelmina is tired but well." He took the stairs 3 at a time, bursting into the bedroom with no thought for propriety. Wilhelmina lay in the bed, her hair damp with sweat, looking exhausted and more beautiful than he had ever seen her. In her arms was a tiny bundle, and when she pulled back the blanket, Theodore saw his son for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a red, scrunched face. He was perfect. "You want to hold him?" Wilhelmina asked softly. Theodore nodded, not trusting his voice. She transferred the baby carefully into his arms, and he cradled his son against his chest, overwhelmed by the fierce rush of love and protectiveness. "He is perfect," he finally managed. "You are perfect. Thank you for this gift." "What should we name him?" Wilhelmina asked. They had discussed names endlessly but never quite decided. Theodore looked down at his son, considering. "Thomas, after my father. Thomas William Walsh." "Thomas," Wilhelmina repeated, trying it out. "I like it. Thomas Walsh." The baby, as if responding to his name, opened his eyes briefly, revealing dark blue that would probably change color in time. He yawned hugely, then settled back to sleep, content in his father's arms. The doctor and the women left them alone finally, with instructions for Wilhelmina's recovery and the baby's care. Theodore sat on the edge of the bed, their son in his arms and Wilhelmina beside him, and felt a completeness he had never known was possible. "I love you," he said, not for the first time but with renewed depth. "I love both of you more than I can say. I love you too." Wilhelmina leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for finding me, for bringing me here, for making a home where I could be free of shame." "There never was any shame," Theodore said firmly. "Only injustice and lies. But that is all behind you now, behind us. We have got our son, our ranch, our life together. The past does not matter anymore." And looking down at Thomas, sleeping peacefully in his father's arms, Wilhelmina knew it was true. The shame that had driven her from Philadelphia, the fear and uncertainty that had plagued her journey west, all of it had led her here. To this man, this home, this family. The past was gone, forgiven if not forgotten. The future stretched ahead, bright and full of promise. The weeks following Thomas's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, but Wilhelmina had never been happier. Theodore proved to be a devoted father, rising with her for nighttime feedings, walking the floor with a fussy baby so she could rest, changing diapers without complaint. Watching him with their son made her fall in love with him all over again. The community rallied around them as well. Clara and the other women brought meals and offered advice. Neighbors stopped by to admire the baby and drop off gifts. Thomas Walsh was welcomed into the world with an abundance of love and support. As Thomas grew from a newborn into an infant and then a curious toddler, the Walsh Ranch continued to prosper. Theodore expanded the horse breeding operation, building additional corrals and a larger barn. Wilhelmina managed the household finances with skill, ensuring they saved enough for lean times while also making improvements to their property. When Thomas was 2 years old, Wilhelmina discovered she was pregnant again. The news brought the same joy as the first time, though Theodore was even more anxious, remembering the difficulty of Thomas's birth. "I am fine," Wilhelmina assured him repeatedly. "Every pregnancy is different. This one might be easier." She was right. Their daughter, born on a mild autumn day, arrived quickly and with far less difficulty. They named her Margaret Rose, and she had her mother's blonde hair and her father's dark eyes. Theodore held his daughter with the same wonder he had shown with Thomas, marveling at her tiny fingers and the way she gripped his thumb with surprising strength. "Two children," he said, looking at Wilhelmina with awe. "We have got two perfect children." "Our family is complete," Wilhelmina said contentedly, though she left room for the possibility of more children if that is what life brought them. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons, planting and harvest, birth and growth. Thomas grew into a serious, intelligent boy who followed his father everywhere, learning the ranch work and developing the same gentle way with horses. Margaret was more spirited, laughing and getting into mischief, keeping everyone on their toes. On Thomas's 5th birthday, Theodore took him aside for a serious conversation. "You are old enough now to understand something important," he said. "Your mother is the bravest person I know. Before she came here, she faced difficulty and injustice in Philadelphia. People accused her of things she did not do, and she had to leave everything behind to start fresh." Thomas looked up at his father with wide eyes. "Like an adventure, in a way, yes, but a hard one. I want you to understand that your mother chose to come here, chose to build a new life, chose our family. She is strong and courageous, and you should always treat her with the respect she deserves." "I will, Papa," Thomas promised solemnly. Theodore hugged his son, grateful that his children would grow up in a world where their mother's past did not define her, where she was simply loved for who she was. More children did come. When Margaret was 3, Wilhelmina gave birth to twins, 2 boys they named Samuel and Joseph. The house that had once seemed too large for one man now rang with the noise and chaos of 4 children. Theodore built an addition, adding more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. The ranch continued to grow, and they hired additional hands to help manage the increased workload. Samuel Potter, who had been there from the beginning, became foreman, and he eventually married a nice girl from town and built his own house on the property. Through it all, the love between Theodore and Wilhelmina only deepened. They still made time for quiet evenings on the porch, talking about their days and their dreams. They still looked at each other across crowded rooms and shared private smiles. The passion between them had not dimmed with time or familiarity. If anything, it had grown stronger, rooted in genuine partnership and mutual respect. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Theodore surprised Wilhelmina with a trip to Kansas City, their first time away from the ranch since their honeymoon. They left the children in Clara's capable care and took the train, spending 3 days exploring the city, attending the theater, eating in restaurants. "This is wonderful," Wilhelmina said as they strolled through a park, her arm linked through his. "But I find myself missing the children and the ranch." "Me too," Theodore admitted. "As much as I am enjoying this, I will be happy to get home. Home." The word carried so much weight now, so much meaning. It was not just a place, but a life they had built together, a family they had created, a love that had overcome shame and fear and distance. When they returned to Tulsa, all 4 children rushed to greet them, talking over each other in their excitement to share everything that had happened in their parents' absence. Theodore scooped up the twins while Thomas and Margaret clung to Wilhelmina's skirts, and they all made their way into the house together. That evening, after the children were finally asleep, Theodore and Wilhelmina sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The prairie stretched out before them, bathed in moonlight, peaceful and beautiful. "You ever think about Philadelphia?" Theodore asked quietly. "About what your life might have been if things had been different?" Wilhelmina considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But I cannot regret the path that brought me here. If those terrible things had not happened, I would never have answered your advertisement. I would never have found you or had our children. So in a strange way, I am grateful." "I am grateful too," Theodore said. "Grateful to whatever twist of fate brought you to me. You have made my life richer than I ever imagined possible." She leaned against him, comfortable and content. "You kept your promise, you know, the one you made before we married. You said there was no shame in your home, and you were right. I have never felt judged here, never felt like I had to hide or apologize for my past. You gave me that freedom. You gave yourself that freedom by being brave enough to start over, by trusting me with the truth." Theodore kissed the top of her head. "All I did was recognize what an extraordinary woman you are." They sat in peaceful silence as the night deepened around them. In the distance, a coyote called and one of the horses answered with a soft nicker. The sounds of home, familiar and beloved. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also joy and growth. The children grew healthy and strong, each developing their own personalities and interests. Thomas, as expected, took to ranching like he was born to it, while Margaret surprised everyone by showing a talent for numbers and business. The twins were still young, but already showing signs of their father's patience and their mother's determination. Tulsa grew as well, transforming from a small frontier town into a thriving community. Theodore and Wilhelmina became pillars of that community, respected and well-loved. They hosted barn dances and holiday gatherings. They helped neighbors in times of trouble and celebrated with them in times of joy. Clara remained Wilhelmina's closest friend, and their children grew up together like cousins. The quilting circle continued to meet every Wednesday, now including the next generation of young women. Wilhelmina taught Margaret and the other girls to sew, passing on the skills her own mother had taught her. When Thomas turned 16, Theodore gave him his own horse and a section of land to manage. "This is yours," he said, "to work as you see fit. The profits will be yours too. I want you to learn responsibility, to understand what it takes to build something." Thomas threw himself into the challenge with enthusiasm, proving he had inherited his father's work ethic and his mother's business sense. By the end of the first year, he had turned a profit and was already making plans for expansion. Margaret, at 14, asked to be included in the ranch's bookkeeping. Wilhelmina gladly handed over the ledgers, teaching her daughter the intricacies of accounting and financial management. Margaret took to it naturally, soon suggesting efficiencies and cost savings that impressed both her parents. The twins, at 10, were still finding their way, but they showed promise in different areas. Samuel loved working with the horses, while Joseph was fascinated by the mechanical aspects of ranching, always tinkering with equipment and finding ways to improve their tools. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Theodore and Wilhelmina renewed their vows in the same church where they had first married. Their children stood up with them, and what felt like the entire town crowded into the pews. The preacher, older now but still serving the community, spoke about the enduring power of love and commitment. 20 years ago, I married a nervous cowboy and a brave young woman who had traveled halfway across the country to start a new life, he said. I have watched their love grow and deepen. I have seen them build not just a successful ranch but a family and a legacy. They are proof that with faith, hard work, and genuine love, anything is possible. After the ceremony, there was another reception, even larger than the first. People came from all over Oklahoma to celebrate with them. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. As the sun set and the party continued, Theodore pulled Wilhelmina aside, leading her to a quiet spot behind the church where they could be alone for a moment. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate gold locket engraved with their initials and wedding date. When she opened it, she found a tiny photograph of all 6 of them, the whole family together. "Theodore, it is beautiful." Her eyes filled with tears. "I wanted you to have something that represents everything we have built together, our family, our love, our life." He fastened the locket around her neck, his fingers gentle on her skin. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Wilhelmina Walsh. I love you more today than I did 20 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." She turned and kissed him, pouring 20 years of love and gratitude into it. When they finally broke apart, both were crying happy tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "Thank you for being the man who saw past my shame, who gave me a home and a family, who made me believe I deserved happiness." "You always deserved happiness," Theodore said firmly. "I just feel blessed that I got to be the one to share it with you." They rejoined the party, dancing together as the stars came out overhead. Their children watched with varying degrees of amusement and embarrassment as their parents waltzed, clearly still in love after all these years. "You think we will be like that when we are old?" Margaret asked Thomas, nodding toward their parents. Thomas smiled. "I hope so. They have got something special." "Yeah," Margaret agreed. "They really do." As the years rolled on, Theodore and Wilhelmina watched their children grow into adults. Thomas married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, expanding the Walsh holdings through the union. It was a love match, though, not just a business arrangement. Theodore made sure of that, remembering his own mail-order bride and the love that had grown from such pragmatic beginnings. Margaret went to college in Kansas City, one of the first women from Tulsa to do so, studying business and economics. She returned home to help manage the ranch's financial affairs, turning it into one of the most profitable operations in Oklahoma. She eventually married a lawyer from Tulsa, a quiet man who appreciated her intelligence and ambition. The twins both stayed on the ranch, Samuel taking over the horse breeding operation, and Joseph developing new irrigation systems that increased their grazing land. Both married local girls and built houses on the property, keeping the family close. Theodore and Wilhelmina became grandparents, then grandparents many times over. They loved watching their children raise families of their own, passing on the values and lessons they had learned. The Walsh Ranch became a dynasty, known throughout Oklahoma for quality horses and cattle, but more importantly, for the integrity and kindness of the family that ran it. On their 30th anniversary, Theodore's health began to fail. He had pushed his body hard for decades, and it was finally demanding rest. Wilhelmina nursed him through a difficult winter, refusing to leave his side. The children took over the ranch operations completely, allowing their parents to focus on each other. "I am not afraid," Theodore told Wilhelmina one evening as they sat by the fire, his hand clasped in hers. "I have lived a good life, a full life. I have loved and been loved. I have seen my children and grandchildren thrive. What more could a man ask for?" "Many more years," Wilhelmina said, her voice breaking. "I am not ready to lose you. You will never lose me." Theodore squeezed her hand with what strength he had left. "I will always be with you in this house we built, in our children, in every sunset over the prairie. We are bound together, you and I. Death cannot change that." But Theodore proved stronger than the illness that tried to claim him. With Wilhelmina's devoted care and sheer stubbornness, he recovered. It took months, but by the time spring arrived, he was back on his feet, thinner and moving slower but definitely alive. "I am not done yet," he told his worried children. "Your mother and I have got more living to do," and they did. They celebrated their 40th anniversary, then their 45th. They watched grandchildren grow and marry and have children of their own. The ranch continued to prosper under the management of the second generation, with the third generation already showing interest and aptitude. Wilhelmina often thought about the frightened young woman who had stepped off the train in Tulsa all those decades ago, running from shame and facing an uncertain future. That woman had been brave but broken, hopeful but damaged. The woman she had become was strong and confident, secure in her place in the world and in the love of her family. "I never thanked you properly," she told Theodore one evening as they sat on their porch, a routine they had maintained for nearly 50 years. "For what?" Theodore asked, his voice rougher with age but still warm. "For seeing me. Not the accusations or the scandal, but the real me underneath. For giving me a chance when you had every reason to send me back to Philadelphia." Theodore took her hand, his fingers still fitting perfectly between hers despite the arthritis that gnarled them both. "I told you on the day you arrived, there is no shame in my home. I meant it then, and I mean it now. You had nothing to be ashamed of, Wilhelmina. You were the victim of cruelty and injustice, coming here, building a life with me that took courage I can only admire." "We built a good life," Wilhelmina said, looking out over the land they had worked together for so long. "The best life," Theodore agreed. "I would not change a single moment." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set one more time over the Oklahoma prairie, painting the sky in colors that still took their breath away after all these years. In the distance, they could see lights coming on in the houses of their children and grandchildren, the Walsh compound growing with each new generation. "You remember the first time we sat here?" Wilhelmina asked softly. "Every detail," Theodore said. "You were terrified but trying to be brave." "I was falling in love and trying not to show it too obviously. You were not very subtle. Neither were you once you decided you loved me back." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the prairie. Inside the main house, several grandchildren were spending the night, and their giggles and shouts could be heard through the open windows. Life continued, generation after generation, built on the foundation of love that Theodore and Wilhelmina had created. When Theodore finally passed away at the age of 83, peacefully in his sleep with Wilhelmina beside him, the entire town mourned. The funeral was one of the largest in Tulsa's history, with people traveling from across Oklahoma and beyond to pay their respects. He had been beloved not just as a successful rancher, but as a good man, a devoted husband, a loving father and grandfather. Wilhelmina grieved deeply but not without hope. She knew Theodore was right. Death could not truly separate them. He was in every corner of the house they had built together, in the faces of their children, in the land they had worked side by side. She felt his presence most strongly on the porch where they had spent countless evenings, and she continued to sit there as the sun set, sometimes talking to him as if he could hear. She lived another 5 years after Theodore's death, surrounded by family and love. She watched more grandchildren marry and more great-grandchildren be born. She told stories about the early days of the ranch, about coming to Oklahoma as a mail-order bride, about the man who had promised her a home without shame and delivered so much more. On the morning of her death, Wilhelmina woke early and asked to be helped to the porch. Her children and grandchildren gathered around as she sat in the chair she had occupied for more than 50 years, looking out over the prairie she had come to love. "Tell me again about how you and Grandpa met," one of the youngest great-grandchildren asked, climbing into her lap. Wilhelmina smiled and began the story she had told so many times. "It was 1891, and I stepped off a train in Tulsa, running from shame and fear. Your great-grandfather was waiting on the platform, and when he looked at me, I knew everything was going to be all right." As she finished the story, Surrounded by the family she and Theodore had created, Wilhelmina closed her eyes and slipped away peacefully. The Walsh family buried her beside Theodore in the cemetery overlooking the ranch, two headstones side by side marking the resting place of the couple who had built a dynasty from love and determination. The ranch continued under the management of their descendants, each generation adding their own contributions while honoring the legacy left by Theodore and Wilhelmina. The story of the mail-order bride and the cowboy who promised her a home without shame became family legend, told and retold to remind each new generation of where they came from and the values they should uphold. In the main house, now over a century old but lovingly maintained, Wilhelmina's locket hung in a place of honor. Inside was still the photograph of the family, faded now but precious. And on the porch where two people had fallen in love and built a life together, rocking chairs still sat waiting, holding space for love stories yet to be written. The prairie rolled on forever, witness to it all, unchanged and unchanging. And somewhere in the Oklahoma wind, if you listened carefully, you could hear the echo of a promise made long ago. There is no shame in my home. Only love, only acceptance, only the chance to build something beautiful from the ashes of the past. That promise, made by a cowboy to a frightened young woman in 1891, echoed through the generations, shaping a family and a legacy that proved love could indeed conquer shame, fear, and distance. It stood as testament to the power of seeing people for who they truly are rather than what others say about them, and to the extraordinary lives that can be built when two people choose to believe in each other. The Walsh family ranch stood strong well into the next century, a monument not just to hard work and business acumen, but to the enduring power of love freely given and gratefully received. And at the foundation of it all was a simple truth that Theodore had understood from the very beginning. Shame has no power where love and acceptance dwell. In his home, in his heart, and in the family he built with Wilhelmina, there was only room for joy, for growth, and for a love that transcended time itself.